22. He literally said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? All right, we'll talk about which, I'll go through, if I have time, I'll go through the 7 things that he said on the cross in the order of them. But this is one of them. He said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? The Jews understood Psalm 22, just so you get an understanding how important it is. Psalm 22 is a description of Jesus' crucifixion. There's some dates that are important with this. David, so you understand what a miracle Psalm 22 is. It is a prophetic utterance. It is way before its time. David, who wrote this psalm, David was born in Bethlehem in about, this is the year, BC. So, if I got that I got 10,000. That's a little early. I think we better make it 1,000. Got an extra 0 in there, folks. No, I did it right. Yes, I did it right the first time. Okay. 1035 BC, David is born. Sometime during his life, he makes his prophetic utterance. He writes Psalm 22. He gives it to the chief musician to sing and play. I want to say, David, what are you writing about? What is this? I mean, a lot of it does not make sense until Jesus hangs on the cross and says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But it's recorded, it's in the scriptures. The earliest historical date we have for an actual crucifixion, someone being crucified, is about 500 BC. Darius. We have a written record of Darius ordering the crucifixion of a certain number of people. So, in 1035, death by crucifixion did not exist. If you check the Old Testament record, if they really wanted to insult someone when they killed them, they would hang them on a tree. After they what, folks? After they killed them. We see that in the Bible. We never see someone being crucified in the Old Testament. That form of death did not exist. So 500 years before there is a crucifixion, David is writing about it. Jesus will not be born until 1,000 years later. So this is an amazing prophetic utterance to write about something that didn't exist before it exists. And then it came to pass. All right. I wanted you to see those dates. And then, I don't know, just let me see, Sean, how many have actually looked through Psalm 22, looking for prophetic things about the crucifixion? How many have done that? A couple of you? Not too many. Okay. We'll go through some of them with you anyways. I have some highlighted here. To fulfill Psalm 22, the sky had to go dark in the middle of the day or this would not be fulfilled properly. Look at it. Oh my God, I cry to you in the daytime, but you do not hear. And in the night season, and am not silent. Jesus was crucified during the day, but it went dark, so he was also crucified at what? Night. At night. Literally fulfilling Psalm 22. Could not fulfill Psalm 22 properly unless the lights went out on him. It's interesting. Let's go on here now. In verse 7, all those who see me ridicule me. We know this from the Gospels that they mocked him when he was on the cross. They shoot out the lip, they shake the head, saying, he trusted in the Lord, let him rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. They're literally taking the words out of the mouth of people walking by when Jesus is crucified. We know this from the Gospels. There's a mention, just quickly, that of him coming from his mother's womb. Obviously he did. He was God's from the womb because he was virgin born and sinless. He was Son of God at birth. And that's what the next several verses say. I'm not going to do every verse here, but I'm going to skip on to some high points. Verse 14, what it feels like to be crucified. In verse 14, I am poured out like water. Obviously, he's losing body fluids and blood while he hangs on the cross. All my bones are out of joint. If you imagine being hung from your arms by 2 nails, what your joints feel like. My heart is like wax. This is a medically accurate statement because they have studied crucifixion. Because of the position you're in, fluid builds up around the heart. The heart is under tremendous duress. So, it's very painful. Then, my strength is dried up like potsherd, and my tongue clings to my jaws. On the cross, what did Jesus say that this was true? What two words? I what? I thirst. Absolutely. So, it's a literal fulfillment here. Here we go again. All right, next. The dogs have surrounded me. The Gentiles were called dogs. Romans surrounded him and did the actual crucifixion. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me, speaking of his enemies, surrounding and watching, and amazingly prophetic. At the end of verse 16, they pierced my hands and my feet. Now, David is writing this in the first person, like it's happening to him. But we know much about the life of David. He never had his hands and feet pierced. He is speaking of Christ. And lastly, that is obvious here, they gambled for his garments at the cross. The Roman soldiers did. Ancient garments were handmade, so they were expensive. They were valuable. A man's garment was worth a good deal of money. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothes they cast lots. So I could go into more there, but obviously, when Jesus says this on the cross, he is signaling for the Jews to go back and look at Psalm 22 and see that he is fulfilling the scriptures that all along, David, the anointed one, the anointed shepherd boy, was foretelling his death. Okay. Now, we're back in the Gospels here. When Jesus had cried with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And the earth did quake and the rocks rent. And there's a little part here that goes next that often people forget. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Now, just so you understand this a little bit, the timing here, say, first of all, there's a mention about this, the curtain covering the holies of holies. Josephus actually gives the measurements of it, and I believe it is 40 cubits high. It's huge. And he said it was as thick as a man's hand. Now, historians kind of look at this a little bit. I don't know, hold my marker and do this. Meaning the thickness of the cloth. Now, it was, like any kind of cloth, maybe folded. They don't know if he really meant it literally, or it was just his way of saying the cloth was very thick, to say it was a hand thick. But this thing split was quite a miracle, where something this heavy, this big, to split from the center, from top to bottom. So Josephus is a massive curtain they made. And so we called it a hand's breadth, the thickness of it. Now, three things. You have an earthquake, and it actually says that rocks moved. Now, what do we got? How's it say? Rocks went and cracked rocks. And what they're saying is, like Jesus' tomb, tombs were traditionally covered by a stone, laid in front of the tomb somewhere. And that these stones actually were in some way damaged, that they cracked open. You could actually see into open tombs as a result of this earthquake. But those who were raised from the dead did not appear until the third day when Jesus appeared. So the earthquake happens at the point of his death. On the third day when he is raised, others are raised too. That's what he's saying here in Matthew. And we're going to get back to that in just a little bit, but I wanted you to see what happened now. And they came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. There is never another mention of them in the New Testament. So scholars believe that when Jesus ascended, they also ascended. All right? Because could you imagine if you were raised from the dead, when Jesus was raised from the dead, you would be a massive celebrity. I mean, let's say when he raised Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus was a celebrity because Jesus had raised, and people wanted to meet this guy raised from the dead. Well, these people would be like, I mean, you'd hear about them in the book of Acts, but there's no mention of them. So we believe they were taken up when Jesus was taken up. And we're going to get back to that subject. Now, what Jesus cried out at his death, his last statement would be, when Jesus had cried with a loud voice in Luke 23:46, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the spirit, or gave up the ghost. That's his last statement on the cross. Now, he is dead at 3 in the afternoon, the 9th hour. He is raised early Sunday morning before sunrise. His spirit has left his body at the moment of death. He's given up his spirit. Now, here's your question. Where did his spirit go during those 3 days? Did it stay in the tomb? Did it go to heaven? Did it go to hell? Where did it go? Let's see what I get from answers from you. This is where Christians, many times, really don't know. We have to look at the scriptures carefully. Okay? He has properly, usually the word that translates hell should be Hades, means the place of the dead. Okay, so Patrick says when he died, his spirit went down to the place of the dead. Okay, let's see what other answers I get here. Anybody else brave enough to give me an answer? All 3. Sooner or later, yes, you're right, but we'll go through the order of those. Hell, he preached to the captives in hell. Yes. Heaven, blood on the mercy seat. Okay, now, it's the timing of those things we're going to look at. Those are good answers. Okay. Someone remember this? What did he say to the thief on the cross? Today you'll be with me in what? Paradise. So, let's get these things straightened out. How do these all fit together? Here's why people get a little confused about it. I'm going to give you some scriptures. 2 Corinthians 5:8 tells us what happens when you die. We are confident, I say, and willing rather, to be absent from the body is to be what? Present with the Lord. So because of that, many people believe at the moment of his death, he ascended into heaven. But it's not what the scriptures actually teach. I'll give you another verse here. Luke 23:43, this is what we mentioned. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. So because he said paradise, many believe that that day, that thief and Jesus were going, their spirits were going where? To heaven. But, let's go on here with this thing. Here's what we have to deal with. Jesus told us exactly where he was going when he died. He left no doubt about it. Matthew 12:40. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the what? The heart of the earth. So what we conclude is paradise must be somewhere where? In the heart of the earth. All right, that's what Jesus said. He said where he's going. Now, let me give you some other verses on this. Luke 16:22 is the story of a beggar dying named Lazarus and a rich man dying. And it's pretty clear here. The beggar dies. He's carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. We believe this Abraham's bosom is somewhere in the earth. This is the paradise that Jesus was talking about to the thief on the cross. He was going to Abraham's bosom, to a place of comfort in the earth. All right? So, now this is before Jesus has died for anyone's sins. So, people cannot go to heaven, if you will. Their sins have not yet been paid for. They're not allowed in yet, if you will. So there has to be a place of comfort, a place of waiting for them. And Jesus told us about it. But the rich man dies, and it says, and in hell he lifted up his eyes, being tormented, seeing Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. So somewhere in the earth, there's a place we call today hell. It's actually one place in Scripture called the prison house. It's a place of torment. And there's a place of comfort. This is the two choices you had before Jesus pays for the sins of the world. So, Jesus dies, he goes down to this place. Now, I didn't do the whole description, some of you know. When you do the whole story, I don't have it all on my slides here in front of me. Just draw it. I don't know if I want to draw it or... We know from this story that there was some type of division, and the rich man in hell could see Lazarus in Abraham's bosom. And he called out to Father Abraham. He knew who Abraham was. He was a Jew. He said, Abraham, send Lazarus that he would put water on the tip of my tongue, because I'm in great torment and I thirst. And he could not. So, when Jesus went into the heart of the earth, there are two places he could visit. Hell and Abraham's bosom. And he really has dealings with both places. Let's see at the scriptures now. First Peter speaks about this. And this is the one, I think it was Paul who put his board up on this, about preaching in hell. Yes. Because Christ also suffered for our sins once, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he also went and preached unto the spirits in prison. The best translation, the King James will say preach, is proclaimed. He made a proclamation to spirits in hell. Now, who are these spirits in hell that he made the proclamation to? I'm not going to be long with this. Demonic angels that intermarried with women before the flood. When that flood came, they were cast into hell. They were trying to pollute the human race so that Christ could not come, because they did not want him to save mankind. So, the proclamation, it doesn't tell us what he proclaimed. Peter just said he made a proclamation in hell. And Peter doesn't tell us what the proclamation is. So you can say, well, it's anybody's guess. Yes, it could be anybody's guess what he actually said. But it was probably something like this. You tried to pollute the race so I could not come, but I have come and finished the work. Okay? He announced his victory over these demons that were trying to stop his coming. So there was some type of proclamation that he makes there. And again, you get to heaven, you can say, okay, what did you say, Lord? Come on, you drove us crazy. You told us you made a proclamation. Didn't tell us what the proclamation is. But that's what we have. And Peter, this is revealed to Peter, but then Peter doesn't tell us anymore. Oh, you're like, this is why I want to wring these guys' necks, but I guess they're led by God not to tell us anymore. I mean, I want to know these. Can't. So, verse 20. That aforetime were disobedient when the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, where a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. So that's Peter's reference to what Jesus did in hell. Now, look what it says in Ephesians here. Ephesians 4:8. Wherefore, he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive, and gave gifts unto men. We're going to go back to this in a minute. Just keep that in mind. It says it there. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also what? Descended first into the lower parts of the earth. Some of you mentioned he ascended. Yes, he did. But before he could ascend, it says he descended. Plain and clear. Okay, remember? 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. He descended first. He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. So this verse tells us about his descension, and then his what? Ascension. Now, the first part of the verse there, I think I'm going to get on this next slide. when it says he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. We're going to explain what this means because it's really key here. This is, if you will, this is Jesus flexing his supernatural muscles. This is his demonstrating his all power. And for people not even realize what he did here, he's like, at the moment of his death, he has total victory over sin, over death. There's nothing and so the victory is beginning to appear. Amen. But we don't always see it right away. Amen. Okay. Now, back to Matthew 27:52. What? The graves are open, and many bodies of saints which slept arose. Those saints, where it says he led captivity captive, that's who he's talking about. And but they're not the only ones. So I'll go on and I'll explain this with you. Here we are. Okay, we've done this first. Let's go on here. Here is a picture of leading captivity captive. In the ancient world, particularly in the Roman Empire, the greatest public spectacle was when a Roman general won a decisive victory and killed thousands of soldiers, enemy soldiers, and then came back with slaves after, meaning they would have a celebration. And this celebration was the greatest celebration in all of the Roman Empire. I mean, there was nothing spared. They left flowers and incense at all the temples of their gods. Everyone filled the streets to watch this thing. And the general would come back and he would be throwing gifts to the crowd. Okay, he would be giving gifts unto men. And the leading captivity captive, he would prove his great victory. Behind him were thousands of slaves. The slaves were proof that he had won a great victory, that he had killed soldiers, and he had taken captives. They were leading captivity captive. So this is what Paul is talking about. Anyone in the ancient world knew what this meant. We did do this. Do you remember after the Iraq War? The one we supposedly won, and they had a big parade in Washington showing all the missiles and the soldiers marching. Anybody remember that parade? Anybody see that, you guys? Jack is my witness. One of you watched it on TV. The rest of you were in your Bibles, I know. Okay. All right. But they had a victory parade. It is a huge victory parade. So this is going on, but it's a quote, it's a semi-quote from a psalm. It has deeper meaning than just that. And I want you to see what it means in the scriptures. Let me read this to you. This is a quote. It's very good here. He does not quote Psalm 68:18 verbatim, but he takes the idea from 68:18 and he expands upon it. It is a reference to this psalm. There's no contradiction. He just kind of says, and we'll explain it here. Here's the historical background. So it is for that reason that Paul writes that he does in Ephesians 4, chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. We just read that. As the words, therefore, he saith, indicated, verse 18 is actually a semi-quote of Psalm 68:18. Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive, thou hast received gifts for men. Yea, for the rebellious also, that the Lord God might dwell among them. That is in Psalm 68, verse 18. And here's the scene. This is the picture I want you to use your imagination here. The scene is that of a victory hymn celebrating God's conquest of the Jebusites in his ascent, represented by the Ark of the Covenant, up Mount Zion. The Jebusites controlled Jerusalem. When Jerusalem was conquered, this psalm was written about it. Okay, so you picture the ark coming up and Jerusalem is on a very steep hill or mount. You got to climb up it. At that time of conquest, soldiers who had been captured by the enemy became recaptured captives. Meaning the Jebusites had taken Jews captive and now they took them back. This is significant because this is what he's talking about. This is what's going on spiritually. And the spoils of warfare became the property of the conqueror to give as he wishes. Now, you and I are those, how would I say it? We were born with a sin nature. If you will, the devil took us captive through the fall of Adam. We sinned in Adam, if you will. And when Christ paid for our sins, proclaims his victory in hell, he is now in a position where he can take the captives that were captive back. So, people, even though they died in faith, they were in Abraham's bosom, it was not yet a payment for their sins. Jesus completed the victory, and if you will, he emptied Abraham's bosom of every saint of old. He says, come on, you're coming with me. He led captivity captive. Amen. Now, can you imagine in heaven, Jesus is now going to do what? He descended. What's he do next? Ascend. Does he have any proof of his victory? Thousands, millions of how we call it, people and spirit bodies that have been waiting in Abraham's bosom, they appear. Abraham makes the trip up. I mean, others, men of old, they did it. They all come with him. They are proof in heaven of what he's done. He's leading captivity captive. And that's the picture that Paul's trying to show you. Artists don't draw these things. I don't know if they get into this kind of theology, but it's an unseen thing. But Paul is writing about it here because it's one of the greatest acts of victory and conquest that has ever gone on in all of time. He's emptying everyone who's died in faith now gets to go to heaven. And so Jesus is leading. Can you imagine the pride? I mean, in a good way. Look who I'm bringing with me. Jesus arriving in heaven with his blood and with all those souls. I mean, this is a great moment for the Lord. This is a great moment for heaven. And Paul is saying, hey, celebrate. There's a great victory going on here, even though you can't see it. But we got a glimpse. When Jesus was raised from the dead, others what? Were raised from the dead. And then they soon did what? Disappeared, because he led captivity captive and took them into the heavens. That's the picture he's trying to paint for us. Now, I don't want to even go into the discrepancy here, but so Paul's words picture, he pictures the risen, triumphant Savior going into heaven after his battle on earth. His battle with sin, his battle with death, his battle with Satan. Okay. With him, he takes certain captives and then gives gifts to those who remain on the earth. What a thrilling picture. Now, this gets very interesting. When Jesus is raised from the dead, the first one to see him is who, folks? Mary Magdalene. Anybody remember? Can tell me, what did Mary do when she realized? I mean, first he says, she thinks he's a gardener, and then he says, Mary, and she goes, teacher, Rabboni. She realizes, what's the first thing she did, folks? She grabbed his feet and held fast. And he says a very interesting thing at this moment. Do not cling to me. And the King James, it will say, do not touch me, but it's clear in the Greek, it's do not cling to me. Best translators pick this up. It's not a hard one. Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. He's been down in the unseen world. He's made a proclamation to the demons. He's taken spirits with them. When he arises, they arise, but he has not yet what? Mary sees him before he has ascended. Interesting. He allows her to do this. And she's holding on, and he says, Mary, let go. I got to travel. Mary, I got business to do. Mary, I got to pass through the heavens. Let go, please. This is what he's saying to her. And she's nothing wrong with her thinking. I lost him once. I don't want to let go of him a second time. She's holding fast and worshiping him. This is her, this is beyond what you can imagine, that he has been raised. But watch what the scriptures say at this point. Oh, there we go. You're back. I got to go back. I want you to go back just. Let's say go back one. I want you to one more thing. What he said there. Previous. Here we go. Okay. I am ascending to my Father and to your Father and to my God and to your God. So he told her exactly what he's going to do next. He So she cannot hold on because he's leaving. He's going up. And he's taking people with him, or souls with him. Now,